David Hume, one of the most influential philosophers of the Enlightenment, left behind a legacy of deep insights on human nature, knowledge, and society. His writings, particularly in a treatise of human nature and an inquiry concerning human understanding, are full of lessons that are still relevant today. Here are a few life lessons that can be drawn from Hume's philosophy. 1. Skepticism and humility in knowledge. David Hume's skepticism about human knowledge is one of the central tenets of his philosophy. In his works, especially in a treatise of human nature, Hume questioned the limits of human understanding, pointing out that most of what we know is based not on certainty but on probability and assumption. He famously argued that we have no direct access to the external world, and that much of our knowledge about cause and effect is derived from habit rather than rational proof. At the heart of Hume's skepticism is a profound humility. We tend to think of ourselves as rational beings, equipped with the tools of reason to uncover the ultimate truths of the universe. Hume, however, urged caution in this assumption. According to him, our knowledge is always mediated by our senses and our perception of the world. Our belief in causality, for example, is not grounded in logic but in our habitual experience of one event following another. The fact that we expect one event to follow another is not evidence of logical necessity, but a product of repeated experience. This humble stance towards knowledge invites a more thoughtful engagement with the world around us. In our daily lives, how often do we claim to know things with certainty, only to discover later that our assumptions were wrong? Hume's skepticism doesn't lead us to nihilism or despair, rather, it encourages us to be more open, flexible, and accepting of the fact that our understanding of the world is always evolving. This is a valuable lesson in the age of information overload. We live in a time when we have access to more data than ever before, yet our ability to discern truth from falsehood, certainty from ambiguity, has not necessarily improved. Hume's skepticism invites us to question what we know, and more importantly, to recognize that much of what we think we know is shaped by perception, habit, and the limitations of human faculties. The humility that comes from Hume's skepticism isn't just about knowledge, but about the nature of human beings. In our individual lives, we often hold onto ideas and beliefs with great certainty, sometimes without recognizing how much they are influenced by our personal biases, experiences, and cultural contexts. Hume's work urges us to approach knowledge and understanding with intellectual humility. It is not enough to accept things at face value or cling to fixed views. Instead, we must be open to new perspectives and willing to revise our understanding in light of new experiences or information. In a practical sense, embracing Hume's skepticism means acknowledging that our beliefs and perceptions are always provisional. We should always ask ourselves, what if I'm wrong? What are the alternative explanations? This willingness to entertain doubt and embrace uncertainty is not a sign of weakness, but of intellectual strength. In a world that often demands certainty, Hume's philosophy offers a refuge of thoughtfulness and flexibility. The pursuit of knowledge, in his view, is not about arriving at final answers, but about navigating a landscape of uncertainty with curiosity and patience. Moral of this lesson: knowledge is always limited and fallible. Embrace uncertainty with humility, and be willing to change your views as new evidence arises. 2. The power of habits and custom. One of Hume's most intriguing insights is his emphasis on the power of custom, or habit, in shaping human behavior. Hume argued that the majority of our actions, thoughts, and decisions are governed by habit, rather than by conscious reasoning. Our minds, he believed, are not rational machines capable of deductive reasoning alone, they are instead shaped by repeated patterns of thought and action that are learned over time. In Hume's view, our ability to make judgments about the world, from simple sensory perceptions to complex moral decisions, is often the result of ingrained habits. We don't need to consciously think about the sun rising every day, it simply happens, and we have come to expect it based on the habit of daily experience. Even more abstract ideas, such as our belief in cause and effect, are built upon repetitive experiences rather than logical deduction. Hume's famous critique of causality argues that we never directly observe cause and effect in the world, but instead infer it from the regularity of events. The concept of habit extends far beyond physical actions. In our thinking, we develop mental habits. For instance, when faced with a challenging situation, we might habitually respond with frustration or avoidance, rather than curiosity or resilience. Similarly, our emotional responses to certain people or events can become so deeply ingrained that we act almost automatically, without much reflection. The power of habit can be both a blessing and a curse. On one hand, habits simplify our lives by freeing us from the need to make constant decisions. We develop routines, whether it's our morning coffee, our work habits, or our interactions with loved ones, that provide structure and comfort. But on the other hand, habitual thinking can trap us in patterns of behavior that limit our growth or reinforce negative tendencies. Habits can be difficult to break, even when they are detrimental to our well-being. Hume's insight here invites us to reflect on the ways in which we have been shaped by our own habits. We tend to believe that we make decisions independently and rationally, but much of what we do is governed by unconscious routines. This is why it can be so hard to change habits, even when we know they are not serving us. Whether it's a bad habit, like procrastination, or a mental habit, like catastrophizing, we often find ourselves repeating the same patterns over and over, even when we want to change. The human capacity for habit also provides a potential path for growth. Just as we develop negative habits, we can also cultivate positive ones. Mindful reflection, intentional practice, and conscious effort can help us create new mental and emotional habits that align with our values and goals. Hume's insight into the power of habit reminds us that our actions are often shaped by forces outside our immediate awareness, and by becoming more conscious of these forces, we can actively choose which habits we wish to reinforce. In the modern context, Hume's ideas have special relevance. We live in a world of constant stimulation, social media, consumer culture, political polarization, and much of our behavior is driven by learned responses. Many of our mental habits are conditioned by the culture around us, from the expectations of success to the pressures of conformity. Recognizing the power of custom can help us break free from the automatic responses that keep us locked in unproductive or unhealthy cycles. Moral of this lesson: habits shape much of who we are. To improve ourselves, we must consciously examine and reshape our habits, both mental and physical. 3. The importance of emotion in human life. Hume famously argued that reason is, and ought only to be, the slave of the passions. This statement challenges a traditional view that reason should govern our actions, and instead places emotion and desire at the center of human motivation. For Hume, our emotions are not irrational or secondary to our rational faculties, they are the driving force behind our decisions, values, and sense of self. At first glance, Hume's emphasis on emotion might seem to conflict with the Enlightenment ideals of reason and rationality. However, Hume did not reject reason altogether. Instead, he argued that reason has a more limited function. It helps us to evaluate means to an end, to calculate consequences, and to determine the best way to achieve our desires. But reason alone cannot motivate us to act. It is our emotions that provide the energy, the drive, to pursue goals and aspirations. Hume's focus on emotion is deeply humanistic, as it acknowledges the complexity of human motivation. we are not cold, calculating machines. We are passionate creatures, driven by love, fear, hope, anger, and a wide range of other emotions. These emotions shape not only our personal decisions but also our collective life. Our social bonds are built on feelings of empathy, affection, and shared values. Even our moral judgments are often guided more by sentiment than by logical reasoning. This insight into the primacy of emotions has profound implications for how we navigate relationships and societal issues. In a world that often values rationality over emotional intelligence, Hume's philosophy reminds us that emotions are not only valid, they are essential to the human experience. Our capacity for love, joy, and compassion makes life meaningful and gives us the motivation to act in ways that promote human flourishing. Hume's emphasis on emotion also encourages us to embrace our emotional lives rather than suppress them. In modern culture, there is often a tendency to view emotions as something to control or overcome, particularly in professional or intellectual spheres. However, Hume's philosophy invites us to understand emotions as integral to our identity and our interactions with the world. Instead of seeing emotions as obstacles to reason, we can learn to integrate them, to allow them to inform our decisions, and to cultivate emotional intelligence. Hume's understanding of human nature also provides a counterpoint to the often cold, utilitarian perspectives that dominate contemporary life. For example, in debates about ethics, economics, or politics, there is often an emphasis on rational decision-making or cost-benefit analysis. While these approaches are valuable, Hume's philosophy reminds us that human beings are motivated by much more than efficiency or logic. We are driven by a desire to connect with others, to feel joy, and to find meaning in our lives. By acknowledging the emotional dimensions of human life, we can create more compassionate, empathetic societies. Moral of this lesson: emotions are at the core of human experience, guiding our actions and shaping our relationships. Embrace your emotions, and understand that they are an integral part of your rational decision-making. 4. Morality is based on sentiment, not reason. Hume's view of morality is perhaps one of his most revolutionary contributions to philosophy. He argued that our moral judgments are not derived from reason, as was commonly believed in the rationalist tradition, but from sentiment, that is, from our feelings of approval or disapproval. We do not reason out what is good or bad, rather, we have an emotional response to actions, which we then rationalize through reflection. For Hume, moral sentiments, feelings of sympathy, compassion, and empathy, are the foundation of morality. We judge actions not based on abstract principles of logic or divine command, but based on how those actions affect our happiness or the happiness of others. This moral sense is inherently social, as it arises from our capacity to feel for others and to empathize with their experiences. Thus, moral decisions are inherently tied to our social nature and our feelings of connection with others. This view of morality has profound implications for both personal and societal conduct. On a personal level, it suggests that we should cultivate compassion and empathy in order to make ethical decisions. Instead of relying solely on moral rules or abstract principles, we should tune into our emotional responses to situations. This doesn't mean that reason has no place in moral life, it means that our rational faculties work best when they are guided by our emotions. Our moral judgments are not simply abstract thoughts, they are rooted in our capacity to feel for others and to respond to their well-being. On a societal level, Hume's philosophy offers a more flexible and inclusive model of morality. If morality is grounded in sentiment, then it is not bound by rigid, unchanging laws or principles. It is a dynamic, evolving system, influenced by the shifting emotions and sentiments of society. This view of morality can help bridge cultural divides, as it allows for differences in ethical outlooks to be reconciled through empathy and understanding. It also suggests that moral progress is possible, as societies can evolve by expanding the circle of compassion to include more people, animals, and even future generations. In contemporary discussions about morality and ethics, Hume's ideas are particularly relevant. In a world that often seems divided by ideological conflicts, Hume's emphasis on sentiment offers a common ground for understanding. Instead of relying on abstract moral systems that may seem foreign to others, we can look to our shared human experiences and emotions as a basis for ethical action. By focusing on the common emotional threads that bind us, we can create more compassionate, understanding communities. Moral of this lesson: morality is rooted in sentiment, not reason. Cultivate compassion and empathy, and let these guide your moral judgments. 5. Value of tolerance and open-mindedness. David Hume was a strong advocate for religious tolerance and open-mindedness, and his philosophy offers valuable insights into how we might navigate the ideological diversity that characterizes modern society. Hume recognized that much of human conflict arises from unexamined beliefs and rigid ideologies, and he encouraged individuals to approach differences with respect and a willingness to listen. Hume's skepticism of religious dogmatism is well known. In his era, religion was often a source of violent conflict and division, and Hume was critical of religious beliefs that were not based on reason or empirical evidence. He believed that religious intolerance and fanaticism were particularly dangerous, as they often led to violence and persecution. Instead, Hume advocated for a form of religious and philosophical tolerance that recognized the diversity of human belief and experience. The lesson here is timeless. We live in an increasingly pluralistic world, where people hold vastly different beliefs, worldviews, and practices. In a time of rising political polarization and cultural conflict, Hume's emphasis on tolerance and open-mindedness offers a much-needed antidote. Instead of retreating into ideological silos, we should strive to understand and respect the viewpoints of others, even when we disagree. Open-mindedness does not mean abandoning our own values or beliefs, but rather recognizing the legitimacy of other perspectives and engaging in dialogue with those who hold different views. Hume's philosophy suggests that true wisdom lies not in holding tightly to one's own views, but in the ability to question, reflect, and engage with the ideas of others. Moral of this lesson: cultivate tolerance and open-mindedness. Engage with people who hold different views, and seek to understand them rather than merely refute them. 6. The impermanence of life and the human condition. One of the most profound aspects of Hume's philosophy is his recognition of the transient nature of life. While he did not directly engage in the topic of mortality in a religious or spiritual sense, Hume's writings reflect an understanding of life's fleeting nature and the inevitable passage of time. He often pointed out that the human experience is filled with change, suffering, and joy, and that it is important to face this impermanence with both acceptance and equanimity. In his Enquiry concerning human understanding, Hume wrote about the fragility of human life, the uncertainty of death, and the transient nature of worldly possessions and status. Yet, rather than indulging in despair or resignation, Hume urged his readers to focus on the pleasures of the present moment, on the relationships we build, and on the simple joys of life. He didn't advocate for the pursuit of wealth or fame, as these are fleeting and ultimately unsatisfying, but instead encouraged people to embrace the transient beauty of life. This recognition of life's impermanence encourages us to value the present moment and live authentically, without clinging too tightly to past regrets or future anxieties. In modern life, we often become consumed by the hustle of achievement or the fear of loss. Our future goals can become so overwhelming that we forget to savor the present. Hume's philosophy offers an antidote to this pattern, suggesting that while it is important to plan for the future, we should not forget to live meaningfully in the here and now. Hume's acceptance of the human condition and its inevitable suffering also teaches resilience. While he acknowledged that suffering is a part of life, he did not suggest we succumb to nihilism or despair. Instead, his view encourages us to find meaning in the moment, whether through relationships, learning, creativity, or small acts of kindness, and to accept that change and hardship are inevitable parts of the human experience. Moral of this lesson: life is transient and unpredictable. Embrace the impermanence of life with acceptance and find meaning in the present moment, rather than obsessing over what has passed or what might come. 7. The social nature of human beings. David Hume was a firm believer that humans are inherently social creatures. He saw society as a vital force in shaping human identity and morality. According to Hume, our understanding of right and wrong, our sense of justice, and even our personal values arise from the relationships we build with others. We are not isolated individuals who form opinions or beliefs in a vacuum. We are profoundly shaped by our interactions with family, friends, neighbors, and broader social networks. Hume's insights on the social nature of humanity are especially relevant in an era where individualism is often celebrated to the exclusion of community. While autonomy and personal responsibility are important, Hume recognized that our moral sentiments, our capacity for empathy, compassion, and sympathy, are cultivated and nourished in the social realm. Our sense of self is not created in isolation but in relation to others. In his Treatise of Human Nature, Hume wrote about the way humans form complex social structures, governed by both formal rules, like laws and institutions, and informal norms, like traditions, customs, and manners. These structures help to create harmony and cooperation, and they play a crucial role in shaping our moral and emotional responses. Without social bonds, our capacity for moral reasoning and emotional development would be stunted. The lesson here is that social connectedness is fundamental to human flourishing. In the modern world, many people feel disconnected or alienated due to busy lifestyles, digital interactions that lack depth, or even societal breakdowns. Hume's emphasis on the social nature of human beings invites us to prioritize meaningful relationships and invest in community. Whether through friendships, family connections, or civic involvement, our social networks are essential for our mental and emotional well-being. Moral of this lesson: human beings are inherently social. Cultivate your relationships and engage in your community, for our sense of identity, morality, and happiness is deeply connected to others. 8. The role of inquiry and critical thinking. David Hume was a strong advocate of rigorous inquiry and critical thinking. He believed that human knowledge is always subject to scrutiny and that it is important to approach every claim, argument, or belief with skepticism and an open mind. Hume did not subscribe to the idea that humans could access objective, absolute truths. Rather, he believed that knowledge is built from sensory experience, and that we must constantly test and reevaluate our beliefs in light of new evidence. In his work, Hume demonstrated the importance of empirical evidence in forming conclusions about the world. While other philosophers may have focused on abstract reasoning or metaphysical speculation, Hume placed great emphasis on what could be observed, tested, and experienced directly. He was one of the early proponents of the scientific method in philosophy, recognizing the value of questioning assumptions, collecting data, and formulating conclusions based on observable facts. This emphasis on empirical inquiry and critical thinking is especially relevant today, as we live in an era where information is abundant but not always reliable. In an age of social media, fake news, and rapidly shifting ideologies, Hume's approach offers a reminder that we must not take information at face value. Instead, we should scrutinize claims, seek evidence, and be open to changing our views based on new, credible information. Furthermore, Hume's insistence on doubt and inquiry fosters intellectual curiosity. The desire to understand the world is not just a philosophical exercise but a way of life. Engaging with the world critically, questioning assumptions, and exploring new ideas are essential for both personal growth and societal progress. Moral of this lesson: commit to a life of inquiry and critical thinking. Challenge assumptions, seek evidence, and approach every belief and claim with skepticism and openness to change. 9. The value of moderation and balance. While Hume did not espouse a particular ethical system, his philosophy emphasizes the value of moderation in human life. He warned against excess in any form, whether in the pursuit of pleasure, the accumulation of wealth, or the exercise of power. Extreme passions, Hume argued, often lead to destructive consequences. The human condition, in Hume's view, requires a balance between reason, emotion, and desire. In his treatise, Hume outlined how the mind can become overwhelmed by intense emotions, whether love, hate, ambition, or greed. When these passions are unchecked, they can cloud judgment and lead to irrational decisions. Hume's moral philosophy suggests that virtues like temperance, patience, and modesty are essential for maintaining harmony between our desires and our reason. By practicing moderation, we can prevent our emotions from overpowering our rational faculties and can create a more peaceful, well-adjusted life. This lesson is particularly valuable in today's world, where consumerism, instant gratification, and social media often encourage extremes. We live in a time when excess is often celebrated, whether it's in material wealth, career ambition, or indulgence in pleasures. But Hume's philosophy offers a reminder that true happiness and fulfillment come not from extremes but from moderation and balance. Moral of this lesson: avoid extremes in all areas of life. Strive for balance, whether in emotions, desires, or material pursuits. Moderation leads to a more peaceful and harmonious life. 10. The power of reflection and self-examination. Hume placed a significant emphasis on the importance of self-awareness and reflection in understanding human nature. While his philosophy was deeply empirical, he recognized the value of introspection in helping individuals understand their own motivations, desires, and biases. Self-examination is a crucial part of understanding the self and, by extension, living a good life. In a treatise of human nature, Hume explores the idea of the self as a collection of perceptions, emotions, and habits. He suggests that we are not unified, rational beings but complex, multifaceted creatures shaped by experiences and internal processes. This recognition invites us to engage in introspection and to reflect on our own mental habits, biases, and desires. Modern psychology and mindfulness practices have popularized the idea of self-reflection as a tool for personal growth, but Hume was one of the early philosophers to highlight the importance of understanding oneself in order to improve one's life. Through reflection, we become more aware of our motivations, recognize patterns of thought and behavior, and can make more informed decisions. Reflection also plays a key role in improving emotional intelligence. By taking the time to examine our feelings and responses, we can better understand how they influence our actions and how we relate to others. This can lead to greater empathy, better communication, and stronger relationships. Moral of this lesson: regularly engage in self-reflection and introspection. Understand your emotions, motivations, and biases to live a more thoughtful and intentional life. Final thoughts. David Hume's philosophy is rich, nuanced, and deeply relevant to modern life. His insights into human nature, knowledge, morality, and society offer valuable lessons that can help us navigate the complexities of the contemporary world. Whether we are reflecting on the nature of knowledge, cultivating empathy and social bonds, or striving for balance and moderation, Hume's ideas invite us to live with greater awareness, humility, and compassion. Each of the lessons presented here encourages us to approach life with thoughtfulness and a recognition of the complexities of the human experience. From the power of habit to the value of critical inquiry, Hume's teachings are not just abstract philosophical concepts but practical guidance for living a better, more meaningful life.